One of the first new cars that we featured here on Test Drive since moving to Quebec was the Cadillac Escalade. It is a fan favorite here on our show, and why wouldn't it be? I mean, it is an American icon, this behemoth of an SUV, and finally for 2021 it got a complete facelift. Now our vehicle here, this is the Sport Platinum 4-wheel drive. It is the top end trim sold here in Canada, and it is a $38,000 price increase over the base MSRP from the GMC Yukon Denali that we featured. And the actual equipment on this puts it quite a bit more expensive. Vehicle tested as $125,068 Canadian. That's $109,440 in the US. We've got a lot of options on here, much like we had on the GMC Yukon, and it's pretty well equipped. Being the top end trim, you expect a lot of stuff with it. There are two things that I would skip and one that I would change when it comes to this build. I do like the black paint. Here in Canada, it's free, whereas in the States, you do have to pay for it. And here in Canada, the power running boards that's included on this trim, something you have to pay for in the US. But the two things that I would skip, this has night vision for 2,300 bucks Canadian. I don't know, I don't see the use of it. I've tried it, I've used it, we've tested it before. And yeah, I mean, it does work, but when are you really going to use it? So skip that. And then also, like we saw in the GMC Yukon, $4,100 for these black 22-inch rims. That's a lot of money, $6,000 right there that you can save. Now, the one thing that I would do, because it is black on black and everything, it looks really good, is I would get the monochromatic badging package. Replaces the front and back badging with essentially grayscale. Looks really good on this color combination, so that's what I would do. But aside from that, this is pretty well equipped. There's a lot to go on when it comes to this Escalade. Now, because of the pandemic, this vehicle didn't come with Super Cruise Control. You can get it on the Escalade, but because this is an earlier production model, they just couldn't get it on these vehicles yet. So I would have loved to be able to test it with this, because they have added a number of new routes here in Quebec to the Super Cruise system. We've talked about it before when we drove the Cadillac CT6 a few years ago, so if you want to know more about that, I suggest taking a look at that. And if you really want to know about the mechanics of this vehicle, take a look at the GMC Yukon that we did, because this uses the same engine, transmission, and even the same suspension, that magnetic ride with air shocks in it to give you an even better ride. And I do find that this is pretty much what you would expect from an Escalade. It is beautiful on the road as you're driving along, but more on that when we get to our driving segment. Now, even though this is a stablemate of the GMC Yukon, these specifications do change a little bit compared to what we saw last week. You get a little bit more front headroom and a little bit more second row headroom, but the third row is pretty much identical. All the specifications there are the same. But for the other specs, for the interior, the front shoulder room, front leg room, things like that, that's all down a little bit compared to the GMC Yukon, and I do feel that, especially with the leg room and shoulder width. It is just a little bit less, but nothing to complain about. This vehicle is 48 millimeters longer than the GMC Yukon, and it is 5 millimeters taller. But what else can I tell you about this redesigned Escalade? Well, it is more true to Cadillac's current design language than the previous generation, which still shared a lot of the same design cues, but really stood out as its own type of vehicle. The front end on this, very reminiscent of what Cadillac has across the board, both for their crossovers and sedans. Rear end looks great as well. Cadillac says that they have 3-foot tall full LED taillights on there to complement the size of this vehicle, and you have the Cadillac crest etched into the design of it. So when you're braking, if somebody's really close, too close, or if you're in a parking lot and you're looking at it, you can see that from there. Front lights are LED, and they're thinner than they were on the previous generation. The horizontal lights take up less space, and then the vertical daytime running lights look absolutely phenomenal. You know that this is an Escalade if you're driving along and see it at night, and they turn into turn signals with the click of a switch. So great stuff going on with the design language on this. I personally love the look of this Escalade. I like the fact that they've put the Cadillac badging on the back sort of C-pillar area, much like we saw on the front of the Cadillac CT6. They had the badging up there. So they're really showing that this is a Cadillac. It's a flagship. They're making it big, making it bold, and they're taking this vehicle in a new direction. Not saying that the old Cadillac wasn't luxurious, but they really want to compete with the Germans with this. After spending some time with it now, I can tell you that this is going after that top-end Mercedes GLS or the BMW X7, whereas before the Escalade, while it was still a very high-selling vehicle for General Motors, didn't really come up to the same caliber when it comes to the German luxury offerings. Now, I could talk a lot about the exterior and everything, but let's take a look on the inside. We're going to show you how it compares to the GMC Yukon and everything else you need to know if you're in the market for the new Cadillac Escalade. You know, I'm so glad that I had the chance to drive the Escalade back-to-back with the GMC Yukon. If you watched that video, I said that it would have to do a lot to get me to go into the Escalade over the GMC. There was a lot going for that truck, and you had pretty much all the features that you would really want out of a vehicle. Okay, $92,000 Canadian is pricey, but oh boy, once you get into this, you can see that there truly is a difference. First off, we've got this incredibly gorgeous display here. GM says it provides up to 38 inches of diagonal total display area. The system includes 3 screens, all of them are OLED. The first one on the left of the driver is a 7.2-inch touch control panel for the driver information, so things like your trip computer and also which information is being displayed in the center. You also have in the middle a 14.2-inch display that has a number of options, including the map. You can have that display there, as well as an augmented reality navigation system, which uses a camera built in to the windscreen area where the rear view mirror camera is. You can see out of that, and if you're using navigation, it will show you on that display where you have to turn or which areas you need to be in for the lanes, and where you get to your destination, which house it will actually be once you've arrived. That's also going to be used for night vision. If you're driving at night, you can switch it over to that. The third section is the 16.9-inch display in the center console area. Now that is the maximum size. It is a curved design a little bit. You'll see on the video that it sort of curves at the right side as you get closer to the passenger area, but for the most part it works great. Now I would recommend not using Apple CarPlay or Android Auto with this. Yes, it does have wireless for both, but because of the way this display is set up, you're losing a lot of screen real estate if you go with the traditional Apple CarPlay or Android Auto design. You can't change that. That's built in from those manufacturers, so you do lose out on tons of space that you could be using for beautiful navigation maps. So I recommend just skip Android Auto, Apple CarPlay completely. The navigation system on this works great, and you can have it set up pretty much the way that you want. Now you also do have ambient lighting on this. It's light compared to what we see from some of the German competition, but it does work. It gives a nice accent when you're driving along at night. You can control everything through the infotainment system, along with having it set up to give you colors based on the driving mode that you're in. Now all of this is great. We do have a small head-up display for the driver. It is not the same one that we saw on the GMC Yukon, and that's probably because A, there's so much tech already in this car, but you have so much information on this triple screen setup for the driver that you don't really need a whole lot more in the HUD. So the HUD is more or less limited to your speed and speed limit. So maybe down the road GM will add their 15-inch head-up display to this, but for the most part it works well. It's just more or less the previous generation's HUD. We do have the rear view camera. We've seen that across the board for Cadillac vehicles, and trickling down it works as well as we would expect it to, and it works exactly the same as we saw with the GMC Yukon. And really the only couple pieces of interior trim you're going to notice from the GMC Yukon is the top overhead console compartment area here that has the LED lights, buttons for the third row, and all the sunroof stuff. That's pretty much carried over, and then the window switches. But everything else is pretty much exclusive to the Cadillac, including the seats with massage function. Front seats here have both heat and ventilation, and you do have 2 driver memory options along with an easy exit setup. The second row only heat back there. We did mention in the GMC video that we were expecting the second row to have ventilation, and that's again where this vehicle will come up short compared to the German competition. But I think the people who are buying an Escalade will be buying it to drive it, whereas maybe if you're buying an X7, you're going to be driven in it. Third row, there's nothing back there, just the USB ports, so you won't have any light coming from a sunroof. There's no heat back there, and there isn't a separate climate zone. You just have tri-zone, 2 on the front, and then 1 for essentially everybody in the back. The second row also has the dual 12.6-inch media screens back there. You can plug in USB or HDMI and listen or watch movies, as well as be able to send navigation instructions to the driver up front. So we've talked about that stuff back there. Now, there are still a few reasons why you would want to consider this Cadillac Escalade over the GMC Yukon. First of all, for $800, we have this in-console fridge. That might be handy for me. I've got my wallet in there, so it stays nice and cold, but you do have that with controls to be able to decide how cold it is and whether it's on or off. So it's a nice thing that you can option on as well. But the big meat and potatoes feature-wise, aside from this gorgeous OLED display, is this 36 speaker AKG Studio reference system. It is a 28 channel audio experience with 3 amps and provides in-vehicle communication along with a absolutely stunning audio performance experience. So for example, if you're driving, you've got people in the back seat, you can use the built-in microphones and speakers to be able to have a better conversation with the people in the back. And that does it automatically. You can turn it on or off with a button on the steering wheel. Same thing goes for the second row. Everybody can hear each other a little bit better. But if you don't want to hear anything, you just want to listen to music, this AKG system blows away everything we've tested when it comes to Bose or Harman Kardon. This is in line with the top-end Bowers and Wilkins system that we've tested on a number of BMW vehicles already, or the Bang & Olufsen systems that we've tested as well. Incredible sound out of this. If you're really going to be taking advantage of it, you're going to want to have USB files to be able to play that music to the highest quality, but even without it, it sounds amazing. 36 speakers in here, pretty similar to what we saw with the Cadillac CT6, with head-mounted speakers and roof-mounted speakers to give pretty much each passenger in the vehicle their own performance experience. This also allows the front passengers to have different audio levels, so if you've got somebody beside you who maybe doesn't want to listen to the same thing you're listening to and just wants a little piece of quiet, you can turn their volume down individually from the driver, or you can turn it up. So if they want to listen to something, they can, and I've tested it. I sat in the driver's seat, I cranked up the volume for the passenger, and I didn't notice a difference, but my passenger definitely did. So there's some amazing stuff going on with this Escalade. We need to take it on a road test, though. We'll talk a little bit more about the interior as we drive around, but let's hit the road, see how this vehicle performs, handles, and drives, and everything else you need to know if you're in the market for the 2021 Cadillac Escalade Sport Platinum. Yeah, I seem to be saying this a lot this season here on Test Drive, but I was hoping for snow today. In fact, there was supposed to be a pretty big storm coming through from Connecticut. That was going to be coming in overnight and pretty much cover our entire province in snow for about 48 hours, but we got maybe 2 centimeters and it's more or less done. So I don't think we're going to be doing any deep snow winter testing when it comes to this Escalade, which is a bit unfortunate, but yeah, what can you really do? At the end of the day, though, we're still driving a great vehicle. There's a bit of snow on the ground, so we can talk a little bit about how it performs and everything else that you need to know if you're in the market for the 2021 Escalade. Now, we did our fuel economy testing. This did a little bit worse than the GMC Yukon Denali that we did a couple days before. And maybe it's because this has more stuff on it. It's a heavier vehicle that would weigh it down a little bit. Also, the road conditions are a little different. Yeah, I still had the vehicle in automatic mode for our test, but there are a number of factors that could change the results. So a little bit worse, but for the most part, you should see pretty much the same results, whether you're going for this or the GMC. It uses the same engine, same transmission, pretty much same everything. It's just the exterior and interior. It's the skin of the vehicle that is different, and obviously the features too. Now, why are you going to be buying the Escalade? Well, there's a number of reasons. Number one, it's because of the image. Sure, there are a lot of other luxury vehicles out there, and some that are pretty big as well. We've tested things like the BMW X7. We also drove an older version of the Mercedes GLS. Those are pretty big SUVs, and if you need to fit 7 or 8 people in them, they'll do the trick. But this is still an icon. It's an American icon that just can't be recreated. When you think about big SUVs, it's the Escalade. There's nothing that competes with it, really. Yeah, okay, you've got the Navigator, but people don't sing songs about driving their Navigator as much as they do in an Escalade. And I've had a lot of people who have looked at me and given me some thumbs ups this week so far because I'm driving this. It's new, it's fresh, even though the design is sort of an evolution of what we saw with the previous generation. You can tell right away that this is a new Escalade. But everything that you would want out of a big vehicle is here. The ride is really good. It's very quiet in here. I'd say it's a little bit quieter than the GMC. That is to be expected. We do have the Alcantara headliner instead of just a regular black headliner, so that helps to isolate a little bit of the road. But I mean, the tires on here are pretty quiet. The windows, when you open them and close them, super silent. So if you're looking for a quiet experience on the inside, this is it. Not to mention that 36 speaker AKG audio system. You can listen to whatever you want and pretty much be transported to a different dimension when it comes to the audio experience on this vehicle. But from a ride perspective, pretty much the same. This uses the same system that we saw on the GMC Yukon. Again, it's an evolution of GM's magnetic ride system. Now it uses an air ride on top of it to enhance the overall experience. Yes, it's a complicated piece of machinery. Will you be wanting to service it yourself 10 years down the road? Probably not, but that's the case when it comes to any full-size luxury vehicle that we've tested, whether it's a Cadillac, BMW, or Mercedes-Benz. But the ride is great, going over bumps, train tracks, things like that, fantastic. Now, I am in 4 high right now. You could get away with being in automatic mode, but the way that GM explains their automatic system is it's essentially in rear-wheel drive all the time, unless it detects wheel slippage, and then it'll put some power to the front wheels, and it'll ease off of it once the traction loss has been alleviated. The problem is when we're driving here, there's a lot of snow on the ground, it's slushy, it's a little slippery, and as you might have heard quite a bit when I do these videos, is they really don't do a lot of plowing here in Quebec. It's much better to have it in 4 high. That way, I'm safe. I don't have to worry about the back end slipping out a little bit. I've got all 4 wheels going all the time. But I'd rather spend a little bit more at the pump and know that I have a little bit of extra control, a little bit of extra safety and security as I'm driving along. The winter tires also make a big difference. That's why we always stress. It's something that I will never change my opinion on. If you live in an area that gets snow, you need to have winter tires. And we've talked about it when it comes to pickup trucks. I'm not a huge fan of them when they are in the snow because the rear wheels, the wheels that have the most traction, there isn't a lot of traction because the beds are usually unloaded. But when it comes to an SUV like this, there's tons of weight on the back, so you don't have to worry as much. But still, you want to have winter tires. You want to use the 4-wheel high system when you know you need it. It's fine to leave it in automatic mode when you're driving around town, but in a condition like this, where the roads are crap, make sure you do it yourself. Better safe than sorry. Now, there's no drive modes for snow. You do have sport, touring, tow haul, and the off-road mode. When you put it into off-road mode, that's when you can raise the ride height with that air suspension a little bit higher. So if you were to do some off-roading with this, I don't know who will, but the option is there for you. That's how you do it. I don't think anybody's going to be taking this off-road, not the regular type of off-road that we try to do here on test drive. I think the most off-road that this vehicle will see is if you live in an area that maybe doesn't have paved roads, or you take it up to the cottage every summer and you drive it down your gravel driveway there. I don't think anybody's taking this thing off-road, and that's fine. It's not meant to do that. The Escalade is meant to get you to where you're going in style and comfort, and it really does that. And that's my takeaway when it comes to this vehicle. I've driven a number of Escalades now. I've driven the Lincoln Navigator, and I drove the BMW X7. My complaint always when it came to the Cadillac Escalade, aside from the fact that it was always a handsome looking vehicle, it really wasn't that much different from what you could get from GMC or Chevrolet. Yeah, they up-badge it and they sell it for a whole lot more, but from an actual luxury perspective, it wasn't that much different. This, though, really takes it to another level, and I'm so glad that I had the chance to actually drive the GMC Yukon because I got to see what that was. And yeah, it's a really good SUV. $92,000, you're getting quite a bit for it. The tech on there is excellent, and everything that you really want out of a vehicle is there. And it just gets taken to another level when it comes to this Escalade. The display here, this OLED multi-display setup here is so beautiful. I've fallen in love with it. It's incredible how thin it is and how elegant it looks, and I know some of the complaints are in direct sunlight you can't see it, but I did have some direct sunlight on the day that I picked this up. It was actually blasting right onto the screens. Everything was fine. I could read everything, no problem. So maybe in some cases you might have some small visual issues, but for the most part it has worked great. The interior is so much different from the GMC and Chevrolet version of GM's big SUVs that you would never confuse this with something that doesn't cost as much as this. But it really does fit in line with what Cadillac has been doing. When you take a look back at the CT5V that we did, the center console area is familiar, while different, still giving you an essence of having something that's much more expensive than that CT5V. Seats are insanely comfortable, they're very plush, you've got leather everywhere, Alcantara, everything that you would want out of a luxury vehicle. And this is why I say this really is something that competes with a BMW X7 or the Mercedes GLS. They have taken it to that level to make sure that Cadillac can now be synonymous with that same luxury you expect from BMW and Mercedes-Benz. If you're in the market at 100 and I'd say 18,000, skip night vision and skip the rims on this, you're gonna be very, very happy. Excellent job, Cadillac. This is what I expected to see with a next generation Escalade.